Everybody, Uneducated Economist here. We got Freddie doing basketball practice, so I thought I would come out and talk about how the tariffs are the new credible threat. Now, those of you who have been following me on my channel for any length of time have heard me talk a lot about the credible threat theory. Now, the credible threat theory is something that I got from the Ben Bernanke speech given back in 2002, where he was talking about deflation and how to prevent it from ever occurring. And in that speech, he described how the Federal Reserve would eventually lose their ability to operate their monetary policy with the adjustment of the Fed funds rate. But he said that that was okay because they had other tools for being able to stimulate or deal with monetary policy. And this is where the idea of the gold machine came into play, because he describes it in this fashion. If you can imagine a guy who invents a gold machine, and with this gold machine, he could produce as much gold at will with very little cost or energy. The moment this information gets out there to the public, the price of gold would plummet, even before the guy produces a single ounce of gold. Just the credible threat alone is enough to cause the price to plummet, even though he hadn't done anything yet. This is the heart of the credible threat theory. Now, this is also something that we have recognized in the past in many forms. A good example of it was during the pandemic. The Federal Reserve, in conjunction with the Treasury, in the unusual exigent circumstance of COVID, gave them the ability to set up what they refer to as a special purpose vehicle. And with this special purpose vehicle, they were able to fund it with hundreds of billions of dollars and then put out the narrative that they were going to be buying corporate debt. Now, again, this is something that the Treasury and the Federal Reserve would typically not be allowed to do, except for the unusual and exigent circumstance. So with this, in this credible threat theory, if you think about the narrative that they threw out there, people started front running the Federal Reserve. As they started front running the Federal Reserve, they were buying that corporate debt. By the time that the Federal Reserve actually set up that special purpose vehicle and had it funded, most of the corporations had already funded themselves just off the market's idea that the Federal Reserve was going to be buying corporate debt going into the future. So understanding how the credible threat works is literally use their words to guide the markets into the direction in which that they want to see them move. And I feel that this is now taking place today, because you see a lot of people who are preparing for the future tariffs that are coming. And now this is a very good example of credible threat theory. It is a definite credible threat that they are coming. It has been stated over and over again. It's part of the campaigning plan. It's everybody's, on everybody's mind right now, and what this is going to do going into the future as people are beginning to prepare for these events of tariffs that are coming. And now what I have to think about that is that people are now acting, behaving, and performing in a way as if they had already happened, or being presumptuous in the idea that they are occurring in a particular way. So when we think about this, this is exactly how the credible threats go down. Now, something similar to the idea of tariffs was the idea of the reinvestment back here into the United States with like the CHIPS Act. And when you look at like how many companies actually took advantage of it, many of them who thought that they were going to get access to all this funding and, rebuild their manufacturing plants or whatever they had intended, found that they could not meet the criteria of what the government was requiring, and that money never really was deployed to them anyway. So the credible threat that led into it had many people believing and acting and behaving in a way as if they knew that new money was going to be flying into a particular industry, only to find later that it wasn't to the extent that they thought it was going to be. And I'm assuming something like that is also going to be taking place with tariffs, because we haven't seen exactly what it is that is coming. And what does come, we have no idea how much exemptions or workarounds or how it is that they navigate the new laws and transitions that are taking place in order to try and create an economy that is to the liking of the political wants and needs. I mean, it's going to be very it would be very hard to understand to what level these things are going to actually impact the economy until you actually see them. Now, what it will do definitely is raise the inflation expectation. I think this is the key to it all right here, is that if you can raise the inflation expectation, what you will also do is over time, if it stays continuous, you will also raise the neutral interest rate. And now I think this is really where the Federal Reserve and the government are going to be working together on this plan. Because if they can raise the inflation expectation and raise the neutral interest rate, what they can do is actually make the economy less restrictive. And I know this seems very strange for a lot of people to understand, but if you understand that the Fed funds rate and the neutral interest rate is a very big question to where it is that the exact level is. Like what I mean by the neutral interest rate is the rate that is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. And when the Federal Reserve is neutral, that is when they are at their like Goldilocks moment, I guess, so to speak. If they could have the inflation rate at 2%, have the neutral interest rate targeted with the Fed funds rate, and everything was moving forward in an idea that there was going to be a limited amount of inflation going into the future, I believe that's what the Federal Reserve is truly looking for. But right now, the Federal Reserve is sitting well above the neutral interest rate. And now this neutral interest rate can't be observed in real time. It's an estimate of it that the Federal Reserve uses that's called R star. And so understanding that R star is an estimate of where the neutral interest rate is, they assume that it's somewhere around the 2%, or 2 to 2.5%. And again, nobody can exactly tell where this is. Now, if you think about the Fed funds rate being up closer to 4.5%, then there is a wider gap right now inside of the restrictive level of the Fed funds rate in accordance to where the neutral interest rate is. If the neutral interest rate can rise off of future inflation expectations because they believe that tariffs are coming hot and heavy to the future, then what you can do is you can make the restriction on the economy less due to the fact that the Fed funds rate may be standing still or even coming down some. But if the neutral interest rate rises, it makes it less restrictive on the economy. And I believe this is probably the main intention of all the mainstream media blasting this out there in a most profound and significant way, seeming to be the only thing that really has everybody like talking about what it is that's coming to the future is going to be these massive tariffs that are going to be coming from the Trump administration. So I believe that this is the credible threat theory that is going to help the Federal Reserve in the ability to make the economy less restrictive, regardless of what they do with the Fed funds rate, if they can get the neutral interest rate to rise. This is also going to work for them on the long run, that if they do run into recessionary pressures, if they could get the neutral interest rate to continue to rise, what they will do is give the ability for the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates well below the neutral interest rate enough to actually stimulate the economy. Now, whether or not they can actually achieve something of that is still very questionable, considering that the neutral interest rate really hasn't risen that much since COVID. Did it rise during the massive inflationary pressure that we experienced? Yeah, absolutely it did. But it's come down some, and nobody knows exactly where it is today. So, it's anybody's guess. Anyway, that is 8 minutes into it. Perfect. I kept it under 10 minutes. I'm trying to get this information out as a lot faster so that people can watch the first 10 minutes of it. And that's where the information is, and then we can go in and have the discussion over it. So anyway, what do you guys think? Tariffs are the new credible threat in order to make the economy less restrictive? All right, let's cruise up here. We got, what is that? Code B. After watching over 100 videos, I've never been fortunate to catch you live. Kind of excited. Keep the great work. Well, thank you so much, man. Thank you for watching all them videos. That's awesome. Hello from Oklahoma. Right on. Midwest Cannabis. It's great to see you up in here. Same here. OKC. All right. Hey, y'all. Always a step ahead of the game. Thanks, UE. Yeah, you bet. I love tariffs. Right on, Kirk. All right. But gold can be mine. I have been saying this to people for weeks. How about checking on our mutual friend Mario Man Echo? No video or explanation today. Okay. Uneducated economist Hunter Biden would make a good drug czar. Right on, Matt. All right. Wait. Not had tariffs since 1800s. Well, that's not true. There's a lumber. They put tariffs on lumber. There's like a 20% tariff on lumber right now. I mean, what do you mean they haven't had tariffs since the 1800s? That's not right. All right. All right. Mario channel is amazing. Okay. Well, that's cool. Back to the gold standard. Nope, gold standard won't work. That's a very um don't get me wrong. I like gold. I like gold for the ownership, for the possession of it, for the insurance policy, to be outside of that third party claim. I'm a total gold bug advocate. Totally go for it, right? In fact, if you don't have anything going on, I suggest you go down and get silver and gold and you start your savings with it. With that being said, I do not believe that the gold standard is a good standard for the United States. Now, if we were an industrious nation, I would totally be down for it. I'd be, yeah, let's do it. Let's go on gold standard, let's go on Bitcoin standard, let's go on any kind of limited currency standard, so long as we're an industrious nation that is producing more than we're actually purchasing. But that isn't us. We have a standard of living that is much too elevated, and if we were to try and go onto a gold standard, what we would end up doing is either diminishing our way of life, our standard of living, until it was absolutely pitifully poverty riddled like looking horribleness, or we end up blasting all our gold out of the country within a matter of weeks by buying all the stuff that we normally would buy and trying to maintain our standard of living, and then we would all end up in poverty anyway. So there is no way that we can go back to a gold standard unless we were a productive nation. Now, with that being said, on top of it, being in possession of gold and silver in that sort of environment, like if we were to start moving back towards it, it would make those people incredibly wealthy. And in fact, the only way they could really do it is to confiscate all the gold and silver again, because that's really what it would be. If you think about it, the last time gold and silver or gold was confiscated from the people was because of the gold standard. Once the gold standard was ended, everybody could go back to owning gold again. So think about that for just a minute too. What would the government really need to do in order to go back to a gold standard is they may need to confiscate it all from you. And that's not going to be fun to deal with. And that was just hypothetically speaking. I mean, I don't think any of that's happening. All right, gold is already controlled by the U.S. Buy silver. Bring on the negotiations for tariffs. Now, what I think is going to happen is they're going to hit them with tariffs, and then there's going to be like exemptions and workarounds and all kinds of stuff to make them pretty much obsolete. So the credible threat will definitely hit them. It was like, boom, you get hit with the tariffs, and then they'll figure out ways that they don't really mean anything, or that they're not as impactful as they seem. And that's really what I think is going to happen. And if you think about it, really, if you could raise the inflation expectation, which a lot of people think, why would you want to raise the inflation expectation? The problem that the Federal Reserve had leading up into COVID was they had to figure out a way to make the inflation expectation persistently high. In fact, that was the problem that they needed to solve, was an inflation expectation that was persistently too low rather than too high. So they needed to solve that problem. And then once you have solved the problem, you need to maintain that problem, because if they let that go back into the way it was, it will create a problem for them again. So they do not want that problem of a too low inflation expectation. And since we know that they're going for moderately above 2%, they need to maintain that as well. And if it starts to fall, then if you hit them with tariffs or threats of tariffs and beliefs of tariffs and knowing of tariffs, then you're probably going to get an inflation expectation from that, especially if the behavior of the people start acting in accordance to that idea, right? And then we'll find out how bad they really are once they start hitting. All right, let's cruise down here a little ways. All right, what if the whole world needs to a gold standard that at the same time? Then the most industrious nation will hoard all the gold for themselves, and everybody will suffer in misery and poverty, because that's how the Cantillon effect works. He who has the gold rules, and everybody else suffers because they don't have a transactable currency to deal with, because everybody is demanding gold and silver that all sits in that country over there because they were the most industrious one. then what will end up happening is that those industrious people who have acquired all that gold will start to raise their standard of living and trickle it out little bit by little bit out of their nation as they start to buy in the foreign production of the rest of the world. Now, it's not going to be an instant transition from this man with all the gold to that man with all the gold to that guy with all the gold. What this does is it takes time, and a lot of time. And most of the time, once it comes time to unload that gold and redistribute it back out there to the world, they don't do it without a fight, and there's usually a bunch of war that takes place because of it. So again, don't look forward to a return to a gold standard. That is not a good idea unless you are in massive possession of gold and you want to take advantage of the fact that everybody's suffering in poverty and misery, because then you could do quite well. And don't get me wrong, I would do quite well in that position. I'm not looking forward to it. I do not want that to happen. I would rather just hold on to it for the insurance policy that I believe it is, that limits the third party from having exposure to the third party out there. And outside of that, I wouldn't wish for a gold standard. I mean, I personally wouldn't. Like, I don't, the most industrious people out there will hoard it for themselves and then try to control the rest of the world by not giving it back to them. That's what we're doing right now. Right? This is it. This is what you get from having a gold standard, is you get this exact sort of thing. How long can the debt system last? Who knows? What does it go to? Most likely it'll go to gold. When that happens, it's going to be mass chaos. It's not going to be an easy transition. See, an easy transition would mean that the dollar works and the gold works. Right? It would be like, no, you can use both of these at the same time. Well, we already know, because we study this stuff so much, that Gresham's law is going to prevent that from taking place. That if you have a good currency like gold and you got a bad currency like dollars and they're both accepted, everybody's going to hoard the gold and use the dollars, because that's what we do, right? Like, that's going on right now. So if people are hoarding the gold and saying, here, you can use these dollars, because if you're going to accept either one of them, then you can have the dollars and I'll keep the good currency called gold. I mean, just think about it for yourself. You put a gold coin in one hand and cash in the other. You come to see me. You're going to buy, this pad of paper right here that I have. And you ask me, which one do I want, a gold coin or this cash? And I say, I don't care. You can give me whatever you want. And are you really going to hand me over that gold coin? Of course not, right? Nobody's going to hand over the gold coin. I mean, well, some people might, but most people are not going to hand over the gold coin. They're going to hand over the cash. And that's it, man. And that's why there's no way that you can have cash and gold standard at the same time. A dollar gold standard at the same time will not work. It can't work, because Gresham's law has already been proven hundreds of centuries ago that if you have a good currency and a bad currency, the good currency will get hoarded away and the bad currency will go into circulation every time. Let's see here. The gold standard is for pirates. All right. And don't get me wrong, I don't like the fact that we have a continuous pouring in of new money. The continuous pouring in of new money creates the massive inequality that we have today. I mean, it is just, it's all because of the debt-based expansion of the currency. The people who have first access to it get to hold it over everybody else's head and separate themselves on a massive scale, while everybody suffers and, like, at the bottom of the line, trying to figure out how their day jobs are going to make ends meet. And it's a horrible way of going about things. I totally agree with that. But you have the ability in this country to use that system to propel yourself to the other side of the wedge. If you don't do it, it's not anybody's fault but your own. And now, I'm not trying to tell you that you have to do it, like you have to go in, take out debt and buy cash flowing assets. What I'm saying is that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. They are borrowing money and they buy assets that cash flow to them, and they do it over and over and over again. And the people who look at that and say, man, that's a terrible way of going about it, that's your business, man. That's your business. Right? But you have the ability to do that too. And there's plenty of people out there on the internet who talk all about how to do that. All right, $4.99 from Redzon. I don't know how to say your name. I think it's Redzon, right? Good evening, Simon. What do you know about Pebble Mine in Alaska? Can't be mined without effing up the salmon? I don't know. Like, I guess I really haven't researched or know anything about it, man. I wish I could talk more about it, but I, I really don't. Um, there was a time there when I was kind of looking into these different gold mines and stuff like that when I was doing that whole like sponsorship stuff. But I basically got out of all that, and I was just like, this isn't for me. So, yeah, I really don't research the mining operations like that. All right. Wouldn't that mean China would love a gold standard? Absolutely, China would love a gold standard. They would. But here's the problem that China is facing right now is that just like anything else out there, they have risen their standard of living too, and they're finding it very difficult to operate in the manufacturing space when they see their manufacturers moving to cheaper places to operate from. And so even if they were to go back to a gold standard, in which they won't, and it's not going to work for them because they would much rather have the dollar standard operation because it's working out so well for them in their manufacturing base. But setting all that aside, even if they were to, they cannot raise your standard. If you knew it, if you knew how it worked, and you were China and you've gone through this literally for thousands of years, right? You've been like, you got history of dealing with not only fiat currencies but gold standards, civil standards, all kinds of stuff that's international trades, being the manufacturer, whatever, right? China has faced it. They know economics like nobody else. Now, something that I find very interesting when you think about this is that if you are if you are under if you are of the knowledge that if the people start raising their standard of living and they do it on a massive scale to the point that they start bringing in foreign production, then like you can see it there. It's only a matter of time before eventually you have exported all your manufacturing and start importing all foreign production. And now, how it is that you have new money coming in order to make this happen is very difficult to have consistently for the rest of time. Continual war efforts is how the Romans tried to do it, right? Most nations just eventually fail. Some nations are able to hold on for a really long time because they own the navigation process. They don't even manufacture anything. They were just owning the distribution of it. And without them, nobody else could exist. And so there are some ways that some nations have figured out a way to make the new money continuously pour in. Now, the only way that I have found that if you do not have some sort of superpower over other nations like the United States has, and you can be a debt issuer, most nations are going to figure out that there's going to be a tipping point in which that their manufacturing has peaked out, and if they let the citizens rise any higher in their standard of living, it'll start in on the foreign production coming in. So what they do is they limit the people from doing any more. They start taking the manufacturing, they start limiting how much they can get paid, what it is that they can do, the transportation they can have. The Soviet type of era things begin to happen, the communistic things begin to show, right? So in order to keep this limited, like you can't go any higher, guys, because if you do, you're going to start bringing in foreign production and exporting the domestic manufacturers. And if we don't have a way of being like the debt issuer, like the United States is, and have a huge military and blow everybody up if they don't buy our dollar, then we're gonna suffer and die. Right. So what do? They're like, hey, don't go any higher than this. You can't earn any more than this. And anything that you do earn beyond that belongs to us. Right. Whatever us is. Right. So this is like, and then if you're an observer of all this, you can just sit back and just see it happen, right? You can see that this is the way that it ends up going down. Most of the time, people want to put blame. They were like, oh no, it was the government that did this. Well, of course it is, right? But why? Why are they doing it? It's because the underlying economic force has created the situation that then has men of power trying to say, okay, let's stop it or keep it from happening or try and figure out a way to keep it going or do something of that nature. But you understand the underlying economic force is what's at play here. If you and I were not industrious, they would have no power over you. If you were just a bum on the street, sitting there on a park bench, not doing anything, I guarantee you there is nobody who's coming along and saying, hey man, I need your time for you to pay your taxes. Like what? Like get the hell out of here, man. Until you start acting, right? Until you start producing and making and working and doing all that other stuff, then There's nothing that the government could ever possibly do. So first you have to be industrious, and once you are, that's where the problems really begin, because you become a producer saver, and then eventually you start moving into luxuries. And by moving into luxuries, the problem begins. An eventual decline. And understand that it's cyclical, right? It's like how it goes down. Understand that our new money system should have failed many times. Should have failed at least back in, before they finally severed it from the gold standard back in 71, right? August, what was it, August of 71? Right? When Nixon finally severed the gold standard, like that was it. We should not have continued on with the new money issuance, but we were able to do it because we had debt issuance. And it almost didn't work, but it did, right? All right, manufacturers always goes to countries where the cost of labor is much less. Yeah, absolutely it will. It goes where it's much less, where the cost it goes where the cost of production and the distribution is the cheapest. Like, you might be able to produce it in this nation way out in the middle of nowhere, but then how do you get it? Like, how do you get the product? Like, they might be able to have like the resource and everything and the people to do it, but then you build it and then trying to get that stuff back into where you can sell it, it becomes very difficult to do. And so it's just like, okay, so even if they can make it cheaper because those people have the distribution for it, even if you make it cheaper, they can do it cheaper because they can get it to me, where you would end up costing a fortune to try and get it to it. Right? And so understanding it from like all fashions, it's not just, what is going on here? All right, 63 likes, 200 listening. Show you we thanks, making video and helping helping algorithm. Well, thank you, P Nice. Yes, absolutely. 217 people with 74 likes. Go hit that like button some more, and the algorithm will pick it up and set it around for more people to join in. Like, share, subscribe. Well, thank you. Thank you. What is that? Niels Hain Dynasty. All right, Magic Man. What if the people lower their standard of living, which would work? Yes. Okay, so far I'm in agreement, right? What if they did? What if, big what if? Instead of always trying to live in a palace, what if everyone tried to live in a bungalow? All right, great, Magic Man. That's a great question. It's too bad that's not human nature, though, right? I mean, do you know how many people out there who would actually, I mean, I know a few people. I mean, I personally am not big into material possessions. Like, to me, it's all maintenance. Like, I don't want to maintain anything. Like, I mean, I do want to maintain my car. I put the oil in it. I maintain the house, but it's all work, right? And if I could have a life where I didn't have anything at all, like I didn't have any possessions whatsoever, but I had all the luxuries of having those possessions, like, having access to it, the conveniences of it, all the other stuff inside of it, that would be a perfect world for me. Like, I don't want to own things. I just don't. Like, it's not me, I don't like toys. I mean, I like some toys, but it's not like I don't dream of, having fancy cars or big trucks or anything else like that. I want good music, I want view, and I want ribeyes. That's what I want, right? And then it's pretty easy. Like, after that, it's just like everything's a bonus. So, to me, it's like it's a really simple thing to deal with. But most people, when they earn a bunch of money, they want a bigger house, they want a nicer car, they want nicer clothes, they want 2 ribeyes, and they want fancy vacations. They want all the stuff. They want to enjoy the money. Like, what's the point of having it if you don't want to enjoy it? Like, that's not something that most people would take on. It's like, hey, I'm going to earn as much money as I can, save it, reinvest it, put it back into production, make sure that it stays here, and I'm going to live like a miser the entire time. Nobody does. Like, I mean, some people might, but nobody really does that, right? Once they earn the money, you want to go out there and drive a fancy car. And that's most people. That's human nature. You can't stop it. All right. Does China have property tax since you cannot own land there? I don't know. I guess I never really thought about it. I imagine they have to have some sort of tax. I fogged up a few parked cars in my youth. No internet either. Yeah. All right, living in a trailer for a year and a half reminded me how big of a luxury a house is. Glad to get on the other side of the wedge with the cheapest, what is that, the cheapest house available? I think it says chilliest, but I think he meant cheapest. Yeah, and that's just the thing. Like there, yeah, cheapest house. That's what I figured. And that's just the thing. Like, I mean, how do you get on the other side of the wedge, man? I mean, you can't be on the other side of the wedge and then say, hey, man, I'm just going to be a poor person, or at least I don't have to have all this money, and then I'm going to be okay because I can live sufficiently and outside of the system or all that. That's great. Like, if you can do that and you want to eat turnips and go fish and stuff like that, and that's the way you want to live your life, then I mean, I'm totally down for it, man. Because like again, like I'm somebody who doesn't even want possession, so like I could see something like that, but I'm also like realistic in the idea that that's not exactly pleasant for like, hey, I want to go travel, I want to go hang out at different places, I want to enjoy, food at restaurants, I want to, do things that are neat experiences like concerts and whatever. It's just like most of those things you kind of have to give up if you want to live this like kind of meager, commune type of hippie life. And I'm not saying that there isn't ways of achieving the ability to go do all the wonderful things in life that you think that you need money for and be able to do it without money. I'm not saying you can't do that. I'm just saying that I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try and earn the money and then enjoy the money in a way that I feel is most appropriate, understanding how the Cantillon effect works. I personally am taking on the idea that if I don't move into luxuries in a massive scale, but then take my money and put it towards production and savings, and what I mean by that is investing in stocks or my house or, putting it into this whatever I want, like the capital places that you would want to put your investments or savings or speculations or whatever you want to call it. To me, that is me trying to keep my standard of living as low as possible, right? Because I could go out and get the Camaro. I could be, I mean, doing all kinds of stuff out there, but I don't. I try to, be reasonable with what it is that I'm doing, and so that I don't expose myself to the Cantillon effect, where you end up raising your standard of living so high that end up losing some sort of income, whether I lose YouTube or lose my job or lose something. I would hopefully have enough of a position that I would not actually lose my ability to continue on with paying my bills and doing the other stuff. So, like, I'm personally taking it on for myself that says, yeah, you can move somewhat into luxuries, but don't raise your standard of living to the point that you can't back down, right? Like, that's where I think a lot of people are like, no, man, once they get to here, they can't back down. They can't take $100 less a month. Like, if they had $100 less a month, then something's not getting paid. And that is a very scary position to be in. Now, most people operate at that. That's the norm. And so understanding like me understanding how scary of a position that truly is for people who most of the time just feel that to be normal because they just grown accustomed to it and it doesn't feel like anything different, it just feels familiar. Maybe that's the way they grew up, that's the way their family is, that's the way everybody is that they know. But that is a very compromised position to be in. And what can I say? I understand that if I was to raise my standard of living, that I would be exposing myself to the Cantillon effect in a personal way, not just like in a massive economic, nationwide way, but just my own individual. All right. In 2023, the U.S. exported $478,576,090 worth of frozen Pacific salmon to countries including China, Canada, Korea, Japan, and Thailand. Yeah. All right. I live cheap. Yeah. My thing is cool cars and small place to live. I would rather have the cool cars and a car event lifestyle. Yeah, and see, well, this is the thing, Chris. Like, that's totally cool because my friend, I have a buddy who's like really into, he has like 11 cars, 11, 12 cars or something like that, and all of them are nice. Like, they are immaculate, they're perfect, it's his hobby, nothing is wrong with any of them. They're all awesome, right? And this is what he does, and that's like his thing. He likes these cars. If it's a hobby that you're into, I totally get it. But most people just buy the car so that they could have something fancy to drive around so they look good or whatever. I've never bought, I like all my cars. This is my wife's car, right? I drive a 99 Ford Explorer and a 2001 S10. And I just recently sold my old 99 Corolla to a young lady who's getting her start in life and needs wheels so she can get back and forth to work and all that. She has cleaned it up and she named it Ruby, which I think is just awesome. So, this is the type of vehicles that I drive because I don't need to look that cool. Like, I've never tried to look cool. I don't need to look cool. YouTube didn't care if I was driving an old car or not. I mean, a lot of people made fun of the headliner, but outside of that, nobody cared if I was driving an old car. None of the people that I know in my life care that I drive an old car. There's literally nothing out there that I feel has limited me in my life because I drive an old crappy car. Like, that part, like maybe it's just me and the energy that I carry and the feelings that I have about my vehicle, but I could care less what my car is. And I think because of that, people don't care what I think about my car. And they don't care what they think about my car. And I don't care about anything about my car other than the fact that it runs and it runs good and it gets me back and forth to work. And that's the only part I do care about. And I love that. And the car videos that I have are by far the most popular ones I have on this channel. Besides that and the lumber. All right. Yes, tariffs are a great deal making tools. Really have to actually do it. Just got to be believable that you would. Right, Douglas? That's what I'm saying. All right. I think you're cool, UE. Well, thanks. Yeah. All right. Go you. Go Yogo. Go you. All right. Uneducated Economist. Order beef and bell pepper on DoorDash. Wow. I don't even know. Would DoorDash even go out to where I live? All right. Any tips on starting a YouTube channel? Yeah. Make a video and post it tonight. Okay. So let me give you guys a little rundown of me getting started on YouTube. So for those of you who don't know, some of you have heard this story before. Anybody who's ever seen me doing an introduction to a speaking engagement or something like that, I always tell kind of the same story at the beginning because people are always curious on how I got started on YouTube. And so when it came to getting started on YouTube, I had done quite a few channels in the past and making videos, and I had actually done videos doing farm work where I set up 5 or 6 different cameras, and I would do all these angle shots, and I'd try to put this little storyline together and do all these intros and outros and just all kinds of stuff going on, right? And it was a lot of fun, right? Doing these videos, and nobody really paid attention to it, and nobody ever really watched any of them. But it was just kind of like a hobby making these videos. And so I was already trying to make YouTube videos that nobody ever watched. And I was really into economics anyway, right? So it was already kind of my passion to be involved with the idea. I was really into politics at one point in my life too. And so I remember one day I was just at work. I'm working a lumber yard, and I'm just going off about I think I was talking about taper tantrum or something like that. Like the Federal Reserve, remember the taper tantrum when they were trying to taper and everybody got anyway. This girl Brittany, who I was working with, and she's like a tall farm girl kind of, Anyway, she comes up and she puts her fists on my desk and she looks at me and she was just like, listen, bro, you're going to have to start a blog or a YouTube channel or something because nobody here understands anything that you're talking about and you are driving us crazy. And I was like, oh, right, Brittany. Okay, right. So I grab my camera, I go down to my car, I fire up the camera and I say, hello, my name is Simon. This is an introductory video to the Uneducated Economist. And I bust out this introductory video. I go back inside. I uploaded it to YouTube. And that was the day I became a YouTuber. Because I started making videos that day. And I made videos after that till I got to right here. So it wasn't like I felt like a YouTuber that day. And it wasn't like I had anybody watching my videos. Because it took time. But I had to make that video in order to be where I am today. So the day that I started that channel, November of 2017, was the day I became a YouTuber. And I just kept making videos until I got to where I am today. So when people ask me, how do I get a YouTube channel started? Start. Start today. Just make a YouTube video. Go out there and make a video and post it. It's probably going to suck. Who cares? Post another one, right? It's going to be a little bit better than the one previous because you saw what you didn't like about the first one and you didn't do that. And you might have saw something that you did like about it and you'll do that. And you'll just keep doing that until eventually you start making videos on such a regular basis that you'll be posting videos all the time and it will feel familiar to be in a position in which that you are making videos. And then pretty soon you won't be able to not make videos. In fact, it'll feel weird if you haven't made a video that day, and so you got to go out there while your boys have basketball practice so you can make a video because it just doesn't feel like you've made the day complete until you actually have, because that's the kind of feelings that you have when it comes to making a lot of videos all the time. Make a video. Do one today. All right? Go out there, start your channel, figure out what the passion is that you want to talk about, the information you want to deliver, be useful, be entertaining, be helpful. All right? Let go of all the expectations that you'll get from it. Lean into tension. Right? Don't care about what people are going to say or do or laugh or whatever. I mean, oh, okay, whatever. They're all going to do that. Yep, absolutely. Okay, now that they're done doing that, what else we got? You know? Like, just lean into it and just go for it, man. I mean, it's unknown. And magic is found in the unknown. So just go wander into the unknown, you know? I mean, what do you got to lose? You know? I mean, even if you don't like doing it, then you just stop doing it. You know? Like, what difference does it make? So, I mean, most people are like nervous. It's like, what are people going to say? Who cares, man? What are they going to say about a busted old down 99 Ford Explorer or Toyota Corolla, whatever? Nothing. They don't say nothing. Nobody cares, right? The only thing that people care about is that you're trying. They don't care if you fail. Like, people care if you fail. Like, I mean, they have a care for it. But they don't care if you fail, if you get back up again and you're trying. And if you're trying and failing, they're like, dude, at least you're trying, man. I mean, I know a guy who's struggling right now with the food cart. And he works it every day. He's trying to do something to keep this thing going, to keep it, because he has a dream. He has a belief. He has an idea of that this thing is going to make it. And every day people are asking him, man, how's it going? And he tries to be as cool and honest and, you know, straightforward with it, but he knows he's struggling with it. But everybody appreciates the fact that he is trying. They all want to hear his success story. They all want to hear about, like, even they want to hear about the struggle. They want to hear him go through the struggle and be successful. That's what they want, right? And the only way you'll ever get there is by leaning into the unknown and leaning into the tension and leaning into the fear and, you know, go find it. I recently splurged for a leather jacket off marketplace for $60. New one would have been 150, 200. See, now to me that's actually a good deal. Like, you didn't, like, it's might have been a splurge for you because, you know, $60 is a lot of money. You could have bought, you know, a silver coin or something with it, but all I guess I'm saying is, like, a leather jacket is something that you will enjoy having. You got it for a reasonable price. You'll probably have it going into the future. You bought it secondhand, so it wasn't even new, right? So, like, to me, that was a pretty good deal. All right, Simon just gave his friend's daughter first car, an old Camry, but new to her. Yeah, I didn't quite give it to her. I sold it to her. Pretty nice. But yeah, I gave it to a friend, or yeah, I gave it to her daughter. I didn't give it. I sold it to her. I sold it to her for what I paid for it. All right. I bought it for $500 years and years and years and years and years ago, and I sold it to her for $500 because really that's probably, I mean, I think she had more than that, but not much. And so I told her, you get the car, you take that and whatever money that you were planning on buying a car with, and you go down and you get it tuned up, you get it, you know, all the fluids checked and changed or done whatever, and whatever you need to do to it because it's been parked in the barn for a while. And that's exactly what you did. All right. And we got another super chat. Let's go check that out. What are we talking about? We're talking about tariffs and the credible threat. How do we get on this? All right. Rusty Dollar. Thank you so much for the $4.99. Reread Creature from Jekyll Island. Okay. I get how money printing separates the people. How did you react when you first read it? Okay, so you guys have to understand that I am not somebody who is big into reading books. Now, I know that sounds funny and I don't really like admitting that, but I do have like, well, maybe not so much anymore, but there was a time I had a pretty bad reading disability where like reading for more than 10 minutes was just too much and overwhelming and I wouldn't pay attention to anything I read. So, The Creature from Jekyll Island is one of the very few books that I've ever read, right? But I did read that book completely from all the way through. And I got to meet the author, had lunch with him, got to speak on the same stage to the same audience as he did as G. Edward Griffin. So, big fan. Um, that book absolutely changed my life. Absolutely changed the entire trajectory of what I was going on. In fact, it was probably one of the bigger influences that had happened to me after reading that book that actually got me out of politics and started leaning more towards paying attention towards the Federal Reserve. And I would really have to give it to that book. It is very eye-opening. Most people have no clue about the Federal Reserve, about the way that they came into being, how it is that they operate, the whole concept of it. And that book is probably one of the best books for exposing people to the Federal Reserve because it is such a boring topic, but that book actually makes it fun. I don't know about fun, exciting, intriguing. There we go. Makes it intriguing, and that way you keep going, through the entire thing because it's big. It's like I don't forget how many pages it is, but it's quite the read and well worth it because most people after they read that book are never quite the same. Like, from that point on, you will always look at the Federal Reserve in a much different light. Yeah, J. Griffin is cool. His wife Patricia, she's really cool too. We got to have lunch at Hell's Kitchen. My wife and Patricia sat together, and then G. Edward Griffin and I sat on the other side of the table, and he asked me to explain to him what happened with the lumber industry and how come everything happened the way it did. And I explained to him for about a half an hour exactly, everything that I could tell him, I could possibly tell him about the lumber industry. And he shook his head and was just like, wow, man, that is like quite the story, thank you for sharing all that with me and everything. He was quite impressed with everything. Credible threats. I'm buying you $5 billion super chat on credit. Hey, right on. Red is on. I appreciate appreciate the five. What was it? 5 billion? How much are you gonna give me? $5 billion. It's funny. I always ask like customers if they're, especially if I've never seen them before in the store, and I always try to turn on the charm and everything and be the salesman and whatever when they're in the store. And if I help them out with something, like they're asking a question about how to repair or fix or whatever, and I give them like the right product, and it's usually a fairly, inexpensive thing. It might be like, $20 or whatever when I do this. And so they know it's not going to be very much money. And then they can go and say, well, how much is it? Because I never tell them, right? I just wait, I was just like, okay. And I just sit there and they, how much? And I say, $6 trillion with a real straight face. And they're like, six trillion, right? And they pull out their card and then they go to run their card. They don't ask me what the total is. I just tell them it's 6 trillion, and then they print out the receipt and give it to them. And yeah, so it's funny that you said 5 billion there. Uh, I agree and do library as well, but enjoy best selection. All right. Is it worth working part-time while building your own house to save on labor? Absolutely it is. In fact, I'm going to figure out how to get Freddie up on the roof next summer so he can nail down roofing shingles. And I'll be going to work and he can nail those things off. All right. George is cool AF. Can't believe he goes on these crazy trips. Let's cruise up here a little bit. Okay, fun fact. The Federal Reserve is not unconstitutional. It's not unconstitutional. Well, I mean, you're right. I mean, I guess if you think about it in a legality way, from being, created from the, depths of government and Congress voting it in and all that other stuff. Okay, so we got the Federal Reserve Act, which was, I guess, legally done back in the day. But when you think about what it is that the forefathers had intended for this country, it certainly wasn't to have a central banking system. In fact, they tried to create a situation within the Constitution itself that said that you can't coin anything but gold and silver as a legal tender in payment of debt. Now, if you look back on our money, even the Federal Reserve note, back in the day, that doesn't say it anymore, but it said this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private, and is redeemable for lawful money. The Federal Reserve note was redeemable for lawful money. If it's redeemable for lawful money, then what is it? Unlawful money, right? Not necessarily unlawful, but it wasn't necessarily lawful money either. So when you think about what it is that the forefathers had intended, Article 1, Section 10, no state shall coin anything but gold and silver as a legal tender in payment of debt. That was the reason why, so they wouldn't set up a central banking system. So you're right, it's not unconstitutional, but because it was voted in by Congress, right? Who has the right to determine all this? See, now here's the thing. What I think a lot of people misunderstand a lot about our government and the way things operate is that it's all voluntary for us, right? We do not have to participate in a lot of things that people feel that they are forced to do. And then they want to argue about, like, well, if you don't participate in this, and then they have all these list of stuff that's going to happen to you if you don't. Okay. Understanding the sovereign citizen aspect of things, and All Nighter, who hasn't seen pop up here, he knows a lot about this stuff, right? Understanding this is that we have the highest authority and that government is under our authority. Now, most people don't see it that way. They see it that we are under government's authority. And by being under the government's authority, we have to behave in a way that then meets their approval. That's not the way it goes down. It's meant to be the other way around. But because most people don't see it that way and don't know it that way, then we end up having people who voluntarily just operate within a system that then has people saying, well, it shouldn't be like, this central bank fiat currency stuff. You don't have to accept it. Stores aren't required to accept a dollar, right? They don't have to. There's no law out there that requires anybody to accept cash, right? And so what I find funny about that is that it's completely voluntary. But nobody knows that, right? And nobody knows what else that they could possibly do. And because you have to pay your taxes in dollars, and you get fined in dollars and all the other stuff, everybody just assumes that, if I don't have dollars, then I won't be able to eat or do transactions. So everybody voluntarily uses dollars because they can't really think of anything else that they could use. And they don't know that they would or could or should. Right? And because of that, they voluntarily use the dollar, which we wouldn't have to. We shouldn't, but we do. Right? So when we get mad at government for doing the things we do, we'll stop using the dollar. If we all use gold and silver, then they couldn't do with the things that they are doing. And we say, no, we're not accepting Federal Reserve notes. We don't have to accept Federal Reserve notes. But nobody thinks that way. Nobody cares to think that way. Like some people might, but most people don't. And so when you kind of have this expectation that there's no way that they're going to change the way that they're thinking about what money is, and then refuse the dollar and say, no, I only want to get paid in Bitcoin or silver, then you're going to end up with this system that we have continuing on. I mean, it's just it's going to end up being the way it is. All right, 8 to Grub, $5. Do you see where the Fed Powell did not have an answer for stagflation? Stagflation? No, I guess I missed that part. Or maybe I heard it and just didn't think about it much. I don't know. Some of the press conferences and stuff, I've gotten to the point now that I really only listen to the things that they are saying in their speeches, because I really just feel that everything outside of the quiet communications that they have with each other, which seems to be within these speeches and some of the documents that are out there, the public addressings the interviews, the whatever, all that other stuff, I believe, is the other side of the monetary policy, which is the credible threat side. The strategy side is on the speeches and the internal documents and the stuff like that that they talk about. But the public stuff that we see out there, like basically if you're seeing it on CNBC or if you're reading it in a news article or something like that, that's the credible threat side of the monetary policy. So the strategy side is on the internal side of things. If you're actually reading it from the Fed speech, from the internal documents, everything on the news broadcasting side is the credible threat. All right. What's your thoughts and feelings on the Mises Institute? I wound up on their site while going down a rabbit hole and saw them having a lot of material referencing Cantillon, who you tipped me off to. Yeah, that's it, man. I'm down for the Mises Institute. Like I like them. Very Austrian economics school of thought kind of thing going on there, which I think is just like a really excellent way of understanding economics. But really, a lot of times, what I find from positions like that, which I think is great information. Don't get me wrong. I turn people on to the Mises Institute all the time in order to go get the Cantillon essay, right? Because you can buy the Cantillon essay from the link in the affiliate section. I'm sorry, in the description, there is an Amazon affiliate link that will give you the ability to, what am I trying to say here? Trying to do my commercial and I'm just screwing it up. People walking behind me here. That's what it does. Yeah. All right. So, anyway, there's a link down in the description here. You can go buy the Cantillon essay. It's an affiliate link that I get a little bit of commission for, but you don't have to buy the essay. You can go and get it for free at the Mises Institute. So I have turned a lot of people on to the Mises Institute in order to go find that Cantillon essay so that they can get up to speed on chapters 6, 7, and 8 of part 2 of the essay. So go to part 2 of the essay, chapters 6, 7, and 8. And those chapters are the increase and decrease of money to the state. And those 3 chapters to me are probably some of the best chapters inside of the entire essay as far as understanding how the Cantillon effect really works. But the whole essay is good, right? It's old. It's from hundreds of years ago. So he's talking about horses and wagons and stuff like that. But just take into consideration the underlying economic forces that he is talking about, because you can see them really playing out today. All right. What's your view on government printing money every year rather than taxing people annually? I don't know, man. It's just the way it is. Like I don't think about whether or not it's a good or bad thing, right? I don't think about ways that I can fix the system. I don't think about the ways that it's broken. I don't think about the ways that, that it should be or could be or, anything like that. I just think about the way it is. Like I can't change the past and I have no idea what the future is going to do. I can only deal with this exact moment right now. And because I don't think about like how it is that we could possibly go on to like how to create a Bitcoin standard or how to get the government there, I don't theorize on those things. Like what I look for is the possibilities of what it is that can happen out there with my position in which I can take today. I see Bitcoin as something that is very popular. People are buying into it. There's more institutional investment stuff going on. I have been a fan of it a long time. I buy $50 every other week, right? And have been for a very long time. And I was very happy watching it move up to close to $90,000. I have no idea where it is right now. But again, like my expectations of it are almost none. Right? When it comes to the government, they are going to print more money into the future, no doubt about it. There's nothing we can do to stop it. They are an unsustainable debt path. Can they continue on this unsustainable debt path? Absolutely not. How is it that the Federal Reserve is going to be able to deploy their liabilities into the world if they do not buy the U.S. government debt? How are they going to do it? Like most people don't think of that as being a problem. To me, that's a major problem, right? The Federal Reserve is in a position in which that they got to figure out a way to meet the world's demand for their liabilities and not send the United States government on an unsustainable debt path. What is it that they could buy? What is it that they could buy? They could buy gold. They can buy mortgage-backed securities. They can buy U.S. treasuries. What else can they possibly buy to put on their balance sheet in order to expand the currency supply out there in order to meet the world's demand for their liabilities? What could they possibly buy? Not a lot. And if they continue to try and provide the world with their liabilities, they are going to send the government into a unsustainable debt. Right? It's on it. They didn't say that it's unsustainable. It's an unsustainable debt path, meaning that. Hold on one second, Freddie's.
I got a couple of hens need water.
Oh, okay, yeah, go ahead and grab some.
Got him.
Freddie's such a good kid. So they said that the United States is on an unsustainable debt path, meaning that they can't continue down this road. And they know that, at some point that they're going to have to deny the United States from continuing to buy, or deny the United States the purchasing of their U.S. treasuries, because they can't continue to operate in this fashion and expect them to survive. So now what is it they're going to buy? I look back again to that Ben Bernanke speech. I left a link down in the description. If you look at the very end of that speech, he brings this exact scenario up. And what he talks about is the purchasing of foreign government debt. Like literally buying the debt of another nation, putting it on the balance sheet, and issuing out liabilities, which are dollars. Now, this is crazy to think about, and I can't imagine that's being something that is going to go into an existence without a digital currency. Because the only way that you could prevent that money from just, I don't even know. I can't even imagine what this would do if you were able to buy the debt of another nation in order to pour it in order to put on the balance sheet and pour the new money in. Like, you would be able to pour money in an incredible way. Now, you think about it, if you are buying the debt of another nation, who's to say that you are not injecting that money directly into that other nation? How do you keep it there? How do you keep it from leaving that nation? What happens if it does? How do you get it back? How does all this work? How do you tax? How do you, is it just the debt issuance that has the return on the money that gets the liability back in order to get it off their balance sheet again? This is a huge question. Do you continue to roll that one over? Does this make the dollar the world reserve currency? Or does it lock it in as the world reserve currency, I mean? Like, there's so many questions there. Is it going to be off of stable coins? Who knows? But the idea that the Federal Reserve would have to figure out something to put on their balance sheet in order to expand the money supply is a very real issue coming into the future, because they know that they cannot continue to buy the debt of the U.S. government. Or, I mean, they could, but they'll just completely destroy them if they do. And they know that they're on an unsustainable debt path. They're not on an unsustainable debt yet. There's, and this is according to the Federal Reserve, not me. Like, I'm the observer. I'm like, oh, what are you going to do, guys? You going to go buy that debt over there from that foreign nation? Like, who are you going to buy? The debt out of the Eurozone or something? Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to do that with a digital currency? Like, I'm just an observer of all this. I don't care. Like, I care, but I don't care because I have nothing I can do about it. So I have to be the observer and look at it objectively to figure out what it is that I'm going to do. And I don't, like, say, hey, man, you can or can't or should or wouldn't or all that. Like, none of that makes any sense to me. The only thing that makes sense is what is it that I'm going to do, knowing that what I know. All right. The Fed could buy foreign debt. Yeah, they could. All right. Offsetting balance sheets. Yeah. 9 trillion owed to the U.S. Do not forget that. All right. I could feel that kids' high energy, lots of laughs, ought to be a kid again. 100 miles per hour. Yeah, absolutely. We owe 25 trillion collected. If we collect. 5 trillion in taxes collected, 3 trillion on Medicare, too. Like all this, yeah. Holy cow, Simon, you're right. Yeah, thanks, man. About what? I mean, it's so funny. Somebody said that to me the other day. They're like, dude, you're right. About what? They're like, everything. And I'm like, damn right, man. Every single thing that I've said, I've been right about, man. It's finally somebody noticed. I'm just kidding. Um, yeah, about what part? XRP on Ripple. Yeah. I don't like that BS. Simon always has the good view and why to break it down. Well, here's the thing, like I have done so many videos and done so much like so many people have brought up particular topics. Well, what about this? What about this? What about this? Right? And so I have to research and think about those arguments and ideas until I figure out what it is that, I feel is the correct understanding of it. I mean, I was under the impression at one point, like in my life, that the dollar was going to completely fail. Like I didn't think that we were going to have a dollar system. I thought it was going to be going back to gold or something. I had no belief whatsoever that the dollar was going to continue to operate. Now, that was like 15 years ago. So here it is, the dollar's still operating, and my whole idea about the dollar crashing has faded away because I just don't believe the dollar is going to crash like I did before. Like, if I understand how the dollar is going to crash, it's going to look much different from what I had believed the dollar was going to look like crashing, say, 15 years ago. So, understanding that my beliefs and understandings and everything have evolved over time. Like, every time something new or a piece of new information comes in, I evolve my understanding of what it is that's happening out there in my belief system, especially when when you're in a spot where you think, okay, man, the whole thing is going to completely crash and burn, there's no point in trying anymore. And then you realize, well, that doesn't really work, does it? If you don't try, then you're not going to be able to succeed at anything. And so by not trying is because you believe that the New World Order was going to take over, that there was no point in it because it was going to be a huge crash or something of that nature. Then left me anyway, in a position in which that I didn't try to accumulate stocks or so I mean, I guess I did have silver, but I wasn't trying to get into, like, say, investment type positions with buying miners or something of that nature. I just believed that I needed to protect myself from the New World Order, and that's the only thing I really did. And it didn't work. It doesn't work doing that. Like, you can understand that those things exist and that it's very true. Most of the stuff that you hear about that are just so crazy and wild that the government has done, most of that stuff is true, right? And it's not like, I mean, it's not exactly lies, but a lot of it is blown so far out of proportion that it scares the hell out of you, and it's great entertainment for some people, and they make a lot of money trying to sell that kind of thing. Now, me personally, I look at that and I say, okay, well, I'm not going to live in waiting for everything to absolutely crash and burn around me in order for me to be successful at the position that I'm going to take. I will take a position that does succeed in that environment, right? My insurance policy. But I don't believe that that's going to be the direction in which that we are going to go. The direction in which we are going to go is the one that I am now operating in, and that's the one where I try to become the capitalist and the property owner, because everything that I've ever learned from all the stuff of studying economics and all the people that I've ever met from going to all these speaking engagements, most of them, like all of them, made their money in real estate, property owners. From the Cantillon effect to the people that I've met personally to everything that I see out there in the world, if you are not a capitalist or a property owner, most likely you're not going to get on the other side of the wedge. Right? I mean, that's just the way it is. And so I don't like it to be that way. I don't want it to be that way. I would love for my job and the hard work that I do with it would be enough, and that's all I need to be on the other side of the wedge. That's not the way it works. And it's not the way it's going to work. And so you better do something about it, or just suffer the consequences of not trying to get on the other side of the wedge by being a capitalist or a property owner or both. All right, let's go down here and check it out. We got A to Grub with the $5. Warning, warning, Will Rogers. Donald Trump nominates Fox News host Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense. I guess no general applied for the job. Huh. Yeah, I'm still curious on all this stuff. Like, I don't know. Who's going to do what and where? A buddy of mine said something about Joel Salatin's going to be in the Department of Agriculture or something. Did I get that part right? You guys know who Joel Salatin is? He's a cool dude. I learned a lot about like the hobby farming things watching a lot of his stuff. What do you think should be done about the falling birth rates? Lonely lad, there's nothing you can do. You got to understand this is an economic event that's taking place. If you don't believe me, you should read the Cantillon essay. He actually talks about it in there. I don't have my notes right here in front of me, so I couldn't find it exactly where it is. But if you go and you read the Cantillon essay, he actually describes it in there. In fact, hold on one second. I will find it for you. How about that, right? Because this is what we're doing. We're figuring this stuff out, and you need to know, right? And that's a really good, legitimate question. How come? Uh-oh, maybe my computer's dead. Oh, I think my computer's dead. I can't. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. A second. Give me a second here. I got this one plugged in. So, see, the problem that with the falling birth rates, I mean, a lot of it has to do with a lot of it has to do with what exactly people are saying, right? It has something to do with the environment. It has something to do with the way, like, people act nowadays, like socially, like, the idea that there's less family formation kind of stuff happening. Okay. So all that stuff is true. Excuse me. Oh, come on now. Let me open this up. All that stuff is true. And there's no denying it, right? That you can use that for a understanding that there is those issues, like there's symptoms to the problem that we are facing, and you can list all these symptoms off, right? You got all these birth controls and all the other things that go into it. Okay. Come on. What's going on here? Oh, I don't want that thing open. Hold on one second here, guys. This is not. There we go. All right. So in the essay, let me see if I can find it here. Oops. Okay, so what ends up happening is that if you have a society in which that they have raised their standard of living, then it will become very difficult for them to have children in a higher standard of living. However, if you are poor or living poor, then you can have pretty much as many children as you want because it won't lessen your standard of living. And so ultimately, what ends up happening is that if you have a poorer nation out there, you're going to find that in the poorer nations, people will be willing to have a lot of children because any lesser of a life is going to be death. So you really can have just about as many kids as you want, and it's not going to deteriorate your life any. However, if you have an elevated lifestyle, if you have a higher standard of living, kids being introduced into your life will end up, not always, but end up lessening your standard of living. So it's actually a deterioration on your life. Most people who have raised their standard of living will not want that to happen. So in order to prevent the lesser standard of living, they will not have kids, right? But poorer countries will. So let me see if I can find this word Cantillon. No, dang it. No, that's not it. Bummer. Yeah, I can't find it in here. Let me see. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys, while I figure this thing out. But I think it's important for a lot of people to understand, because like we want to blame it on we want to know a reason behind it all, right? And most of the time we want to find excuses to these reasons. Like we want to blame government, we want to blame like the way that people behave, we want to blame society. But then if we can recognize that there is a there's an underlying economic force to be had in a lot of these things in order to understand why it is occurring the way it is, especially if you can recognize it from history. Right? And so, let's see here. Provide laboring slavers substance. All right, the surplus double portion. That's not it. Man, I should really have these notes like listed out so I can just go and reference right to them if I can. I think I got 235 people watching me just kind of stumble through this. That's cool. All right, post note. And you have children. Oh, wait a minute. Here, is this it? All right. Um. All right, maybe this is it. Let me read this through and let me see if it goes through. It says, in the lower classes of the state, there are also men who, from pride and from reasons similar to those of nobility, prefer to live in celibacy and to live on the little they have rather than settle down in family life. But most of them would gladly set up family if they could count on supporting their family as they wish. They would consider it an injustice to their children if they brought them up only to fall into a lower class than themselves. Only a few men in a state avoid marriage because of pure libertarian spirit. All the lower classes wish to live and raise children who can live at least like themselves, where laborers and artisans do not marry it because they wait until they save enough to enable them to set up a household or to find a young woman who brings in a little capital for the purpose. Hold on, this isn't really it. It goes. Oops. No. Oh well. I suck, guys. I can't find it. Oh well. I'll figure it out and I'll give you guys a heads up on where it is in the speech. But thanks for hanging out and listening and waiting for me to find that, and I didn't. I love Joe Salatin. A flee from he had to flee from Venezuela. Huh, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. All right, Vance Grant, $1.99. What's the correct spelling of Cantillon effect? Cantillon is, let me make sure I got this right because I am a terrible speller. So let's see here. How do you spell? It's Cantillon, Cantillon. Now, if you look down in the description of this video, there should be some links. You can find the Amazon affiliate link there. Just go ahead and click on that, and you can find the essay. You can see how it's spelled. And then if you don't want to buy the essay, like I said, you can go to the Mises Institute and get it for free. Just type in Cantillon essay on economic theory, and it should pop right up for you guys. All right, Rusty $1.99. We protect ourselves from war? No. Like you can. I mean, you can have the bigger, stronger military, but you can't really. It's almost inevitable that somebody is going to end up fighting, right? And it's either fighting to try and like for us, we have to fight in order to be the world issuer of debt, like the U.S. Treasuries. If we are not the issuer of U.S. Treasuries or the safe and liquid asset, and people are going to buy that from someplace else, like the BRICS nations setting up their own system or something like that, if it gets to a point in which that we are no longer able to issue out debt, we will destroy everybody around because we have no other choice, or else we'll fall into poverty and misery. Like, what do you want to do? Just sit there and suffer and just say, oh man, we made the wrong decisions. Okay, sorry guys. I mean, we're all going to have to, like, suffer the consequences of this. Or are you going to go beat people up and take their stuff? I mean, I know, like civilly thinking, like, no man, we can't go and beat other people's stuff, beat them up and take their stuff. Okay, that's all well and good, but you're about ready to starve and suffer in misery and poverty. What are you going to do? You're probably going to go steal. Like, it's just the way people are. I mean, I don't want to, like, say, hey, we're going to go out there and end up, like, raping and pillaging and stuff like that. That's not where I'm kind of getting at. But just think about a nation who is about ready to go into a massive depression, and it's because they are losing their ability to bring in new money. What are they going to do? Right? Either they're going to suffer the consequences or they are going to fight. And that's generally what they end up doing, is they fight. Right? They fight to take over somebody else's resources, somebody else's position, and if they don't, then they end up suffering because they got beat up by somebody else who was fighting them, right? All right, Simon. How well we goes into taco and 9? What? How well we goes into taco and 9? I don't get that. All right. Somebody I think has been drinking. All right. Let's see here. Amish make the best of suffering. I don't lose my leg and NAM for us not to be issuers of debt. All right. Yui, are we headed for a massive depression? Um, I don't know. Like, in what way would you see the depression? Like, are you thinking like a massive debt collapse or something of that nature, which would then slow the economy down so nobody's actually doing any kind of transactions or anything like that? No, I don't think I see that coming. I think I see something quite different in the idea that we are probably moving into digital currency and UBI and force feeding of money into us so that the Federal Reserve can continue to expand the money supply, in the fact that the world is in massive demand for their liabilities, and they have no real way of doing that without forcing the government into an unsustainable debt path. And so in order to keep the American consumer alive, they will literally force feed us money. Like, that's what I see. Force feeding us money through UBI issuance so that we will buy the production of a foreign nation so that they will continue to buy our debt. And how else that can go down, I don't know. Like, until they can figure out another system, I just don't know how else they can do it. Like, I mean, there's too much demand for, like, people who, like, are big time into failure of the dollar because the BRICS are taking over, have no argument to the idea that there is no other replacement for the safe and liquid asset of U.S. Treasuries. There's, like, literally nothing else out there that can do what the US dollar is doing right now, because no other nation is doing what the dollar is doing, and that is being, like, the treasury aspect of it. The US government debt is the safe and liquid asset. China has nowhere even remotely close to the amount of debt issuance that the United States has done. And even if they did, nobody trusts China anyway, right? So are you going to trust them to be able to pay those debts? And besides, they don't even, like, they have all these capital controls and stuff. Nobody wants to use China. China is not going to be the issuer of debt. They're not going to be the issuer of the world reserve currency. They're just not going to do it. The BRICS nations, there's not one of them within them that can do what the dollar is doing. And even coordinating together, they still couldn't be able to do it because none of them trust each other enough to be able to coordinate themselves on a level that can achieve the things that the dollar is doing. So even if they weren't going to trust each other, and they were going to use something like a gold standard instead, then what you have is Gresham's law kicking in, and the people who are accepting gold or dollars would then end up hoarding all the gold and just using all the dollars. So again, like, I just don't see any I don't see any way around this. And what I do see coming is ever increasing amounts of inequality, right? That's separation between the rich and the poor because there is new money coming in. That new money that is coming in will be force-fed into the people themselves so that they will be a consumer. Being a consumer means you will buy the debt or the production of the world, right? The world will get those dollars, which is what they're really trying to do is get the dollars out there to the world. Right? And then the world will have to find a safe and liquid asset to put those dollars into. And that's where the safe and liquid asset of the U.S. Treasury comes in. Nobody's like, there's nothing else. Rusty Dollar, $1.99. Thank you so much. That's what I have been thinking about China. Okay, do you think AI is the next internet? I guess the people who get rich off of it aren't the developers or like OpenAI, but those who find applications. Like how it wasn't Bell Labs, but Bezos got rich. Um, I mean, I think AI has a huge has a huge possibility behind it for people to use it to advance their products, their services, their skills, their time. Like I think that AI has a huge potential to create an economic environment of um, efficiency, which can be very profitable for people. So in that sense, I think that there's a lot of possibility that could come from AI as far as being like a real game changer for people and how they make money. But when I think about like what it is that AI is going to do, I think really most people who appreciate like authenticity, originality, um, like like just I don't know how else to quite explain it, but like when people hear music being played live, it's not because it sounds better live. It's because it sounds better to have a live person actually playing it, right? The music itself sounds best if it's recorded in a studio with absolute precision behind it. But when somebody's not in time or their voice is, not sounding right, they're out there just partying it up and just screaming into the mic and just blasting out the music and everybody's feeling that energy. That's what people want, right? And you can only get that as if people are actually performing. See, I look at it from an entertainment point of view because I feel like I'm an entertainer myself, right? And I think about this because a lot of times people say, well, AI is going to take over Hollywood and do all this other stuff. And I was just like, I don't want to watch an artificial intelligence, robotic, holographic image of somebody telling jokes. I don't want, like, even if they were really good at it. That's not what I want. I want somebody standing in front of me telling jokes. And I don't want it to be done perfect. I want to see the rough edges. I want them to stumble on the jokes. I want to see them feel embarrassed. I want to know that they're up there trying to be in a position in which that they are grasping our minds so that we can get away from what it is that we have going in our world for just a minute. Right? And I don't want AI to do that. I want an individual to do that for me. Just like I want to go to a restaurant and I want to have a plate served. Like that's the whole point of me going to the restaurant is so that I can experience this whole thing, right? I want a friendly staff, I want good food, I want quality atmosphere. Like that's the whole point of it all. And I don't want any fakery going on, right? Yeah. Yeah, Robert Kiyosaki is good. He was one of the speakers among Simon to speak at the Rebel Capitalist Live. Yeah, P. Nice. Actually, the very first time I spoke on stage, it was Robert Kiyosaki who was actually on stage right before I went up. And it was scary to have him up there on stage talking to the audience before I go up. Like, because it's 8 o'clock in the morning, right? I go on at 9. He's the first one up to speak for the day. He's up there. He's got the entire crowd just screaming and yelling and he's cussing. And it's just like, I can just hear the crowd roaring and they're just having a hell of a time. And I'm thinking, I'm going on after that? right? So I'm sitting there and I'm like, I feel like I'm gonna throw up, right? Because I'm like, I mean, what the hell do I know about being on stage? I sure as hell don't know how to be on stage in front of 800 people talking economics to all these people out there. I was just like, I was nervous as hell going up. And this guy Mike, right, who actually I met again just not too long ago over at Zuber's conference. But this guy Mike is sitting in the green room, and there's this huge screen. It's like the biggest TV screen, right? And there's Kiyosaki's up there. He's screaming, he's yelling, he's cussing, and all that. And this guy Mike, he's looking at the screen, and he looks over at me, and he says, "You're on next." And I said, "Yeah, man, I'm on next." And he goes, "George must have a hell of a lot of confidence in you to put you on after Kiyosaki." And I just laughed so hard over that. And I thought, man, now I laugh over it. At the time, I was like, oh man, I do not need to be hearing this right now. And then a few minutes later, I go up on stage and absolutely killed it. I mean, I don't even really remember being on stage. I just kind of went into, like, I had practiced it a bunch of times, what I was going to say. I got up on stage and I kind of just went into a flow state and just spit it all out. And it went great. Like, I couldn't believe it. It went over so well. It was probably one of the greatest things that I had ever done. Like, as far as like an individual, even after all the other speaking engagements I've done, that very first one was probably it. It was the bigger one because I came very close to backing out. I was so nervous about it. Like, I didn't think I could pull it off. I've never really been in front of that many people before, going up, and here I get out there and it's just nothing but a sea of eyes, man. Like, I don't know how many people, I don't know how many of you have actually been on stage in front of 800 people like that, where you're about ready to go for an hour by yourself with the microphone in your hand and that's it. But man, even now, just thinking about it, it was cool. It was so cool. Uh, uh, AI only fan ladies be outpacing the real ladies of ill repute. I hope Trump makes marijuana illegal again. Support your local black market. Yeah, trash can. That's something kind of interesting to think about because I know a bunch of people around who actually lost a fairly decent amount of income because they legalized it. And it's like you think about it. I mean, that was a hell of a local economy to have. Now it's just like, they're all out of the game now, and it's only like, the mobsters, they grow illegal and then take it out of the state. It's hard to regulate it when you got that much marijuana growing all over the place. So like, how do you know what's going on where? The cops are just had it. They're like, screw it, whatever. It's gotten to the point it was so bad. Like, here's the thing. There is absolute no difference in the amount of drug use that has taken place right now than took place prior to Oregon make decriminalizing the drugs. The problem is that people exposed it out there, and the government here had no real good way of dealing with it. Right. So once it was out there and people are like, hey man, I don't care if you watch me shoot a needle in my arm, I'm going to do it right in front of you. That was the problem that came from it that they were not prepared to deal with because it didn't create any more or less drug use. The druggies are already here. They already use. They're going to use. You already make a conscious decision on whether or not you're going to do drugs. And it doesn't matter if the government is saying do or do not do this. It does none of that. Like, all that is absolute crap, whether or not you legalize it. The only difference is whether or not you can actually do something about it being exposed on the street. And because they weren't prepared to deal with that, they eventually had to go and recriminalize drugs to basically chase it off the street again so that people didn't have to witness it taking place. But it certainly didn't make it go away. Right? I mean, nobody thinks that's actually going to work, right? It's not going to go away. uh, and I, you know, whether or not Trump makes marijuana illegal or legal, what he doesn't have any other choice in that, right? Come on, man. You know, it's up to the state. All right. AI will give us all eternal life. Download your brain into a robot. The only real AI is Planeteer. The rest is just color by numbers. The drugs are winning the war on drugs. See, here's the problem, though. See, if you go and make it illegal again, like marijuana, if you were to make marijuana illegal here in Oregon, then what it would do is it would cause the price of it to go up. Right? Right? It doesn't make it any more or less plentiful. What it does is it creates risk, and with risk comes reward. So anything that you have that somebody wants, like drugs or sex or alcohol or firearms or anything else like that, if you make laws that restrict it, you cause the price to go up, and you make the criminal activity around it more prolific and profitable. It's just like, all right. Do you think Bitcoin will be the new gold, a safety other than treasuries for the foreseeable future? And will the market cap be the same as gold or more? Well, I see a lot of similarities between Bitcoin and gold, and I think a lot of people would be buying it for those similarities. But as a replacement, is that what you said? A safety other than the treasuries. No, I don't see it as a safety in the same sense as a treasury, because the treasuries are used by corporations, institutions like insurance companies, sovereign nations, all kinds of people hold US treasuries in a much different fashion than what they would hold the gold for. So like they hold US treasuries with the intent that they could convert them to cash, or that they could trade them, sell them, do whatever with it. Most of the time people are holding on to gold to save. Like they're not using it for a position that says, hey, I mean, may need to get in and out of this treasury in order to acquire cash or make a purchase or do something of that nature. The safe and liquid asset of the U.S. Treasury is much different in a respect to why it's on their portfolio or on their balance sheet or whatever, as opposed to gold. In that sense, there's probably a big difference between the two. People want to seem to think like how or why or when or what it takes to get back to a gold standard, and I just don't see it. Like I'm just not. I don't even fantasize about that anymore. I understand the gold standard and how it was, transitioned into what we have today, and what it would take to transition out of this is not something that is even feasible, really. It's more of this is on a trajectory moving forward. It will eventually fail, but how that failure looks and how far out is anybody's guess. And I just don't see it happening right now. In fact, I see it becoming more advanced and more integrated and more used than any time in history. I don't care what the bricks are up to. I mean, the bricks can wish and hope and dream and pray for something that is going to be different from what is in existence, but what it is in existence is the dollar system, and there's nothing that even comes close to it. If people think, well, yeah, they can develop this, like the bricks can develop, they can move up and have that of what it is that the United States is doing. Okay, that sounds really good. It sounds like a really good story. What it would take is something so far beyond what it is that they even have the capabilities of doing, that I just don't think people are literally taking how that could feasibly happen. Like I just don't think that they're taking that into consideration, because these nations out there do not want to do what the United States is doing, and that is go into this incredible amount of debt in the debt issuance. And because they don't want to do that, there's very unlikely that they're ever going to stop. Hold on, Freddie's here. What's going on?
We taking Matthew home?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here, why don't you guys get in the back? Alrighty, guys. These boys are done with their basketball game. Yui, have you heard of Paul Singer? I think so, but I don't know much about that one, so no. All right. Most of the population top fear is public speaking. Great story and great job taking it. Head on. Yeah, well, thank you very much. I appreciate the comments. I appreciate everybody being here. We got 196 people watching with 164 likes. Thank you very much for hitting that like button. We got $29.94 in super chats because you guys are always so supportive of the Uneducated Economist and everything that we're doing here on the channel. You guys want to say goodnight? No, Matthew doesn't. How about you, Freddie? No, he's gonna keep quiet too. Alrighty, guys. Normally, Freddie is like, he's willing to jump out here and say hi. All right, Uneducated Economist. You guys let me know.